Hope it's live. What's happening, everybody? If everybody's having a fantastic end of your week, end of your month, chances are if you were watching this on a Saturday, your Saturday did not go quite as well as you had hoped. So we're doing a little bit of an open chat. Topics can range anything from racing, camming, modding, EVs, whatever y'all want to chat about. Been doing a lot of chatting about EVs lately, and it's been pretty heated in some cases, with opinions all over the board with that particular platform. I always have fun talking about those things because it seems to get some folks a little bit worked up. Other folks get real excited about it. So Rift is in. What's up? First in. So I wanted to tell you, so we have been doing some more, well, we're doing some testing at the drag strip. Different tire sizes, stuff like that. One of the cars that was there, and I'm not sure, I guess it's one of the sport models. The Tesla thing, it was a Tesla Model 3, but it's kind of like Harleys. I mean, unless you know Harleys, they all kind of look alike, right? Like you can have baggers, you can have, you know, the chopper style, you can bobber look. There's obvious differences and obvious, I don't know, what do you call it? Like obvious identities, right? But, you know, really the subsections in there, I don't know. Anyway, there was one of those things. The one that looks like Mork's egg, basically. That's the one I'm talking about. Anyway, just, you know, because I was brought up the point of EVs, we saw one at the drag strip, you know, and that thing was going 1170s at like 116 or 100 and something miles an hour. This is this car. I mean, it looks like something that you would, like your Uber would pick you up in this thing. Like, hi, Uber rider, can I put on the radio for you? That is exactly the car that this is. It's like an Uber special, and the thing runs, it's an 11-second car. What is this world coming to? Anyway, figured I would share that with you. Been posting up some stuff on Instagram about one of the cars that I ran. If you've seen that, feel free to post up your comments on that. Love the shirts coming in. Anyway, that should give you a hint as to what what I ran on Friday, yesterday. So anyway, yeah, just doing some tire testing right now. Really nothing to chat about. The main thing was getting the data on the throttle body for you guys. One thing I can absolutely tell you is that it does and is working on that modified red eye. Now, if it would work on your car, well, we're talking boosted application here. You're gonna have to be pulleyed for it to really start to show a difference. I'll just leave it at that. Stock cars are a little bit different because you don't have something mechanical literally grabbing at air. So yeah, ported manifolds and larger throttle bodies always help. And like I say, I've got in my playlist, I've got the actual dyno charts of Quick Brick's car. When we tested the modified MMX intake manifold with a larger throttle body, I did some extra work to that MMX manifold before it went on his car, and it picked up some power. So in that respect, yeah, it worked, but the Hellcats, not so much. So next on the list, so for you guys that are wondering what may be up next, yes, I still have a lingering cough from being all jacked up for 3 months, coming into almost 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks now. Cheers. Even though we still got the Rona floating around, you can still get like regular sicknesses, and I happen to pick one up. Usually happens about once a year. I don't get sick very often, but when I do, it's kind of early into the season, and I'll typically have, you know, something once a year. And this year, it was like a laryngitis thing that's turned into like a God only knows what. Anyway, so if I cough every once in a while, sorry, human being over here. Hey, Mom, what's happening? Let's see, they're watching from Candelari's awesome Italian restaurant. Mom, David, Janice, David, Tom, and Joanne say hello. What's up, gang? Y'all stay out of trouble this evening. Try not to do anything that I wouldn't. Make sure you wash your hands, too. I'm looking at you, Dave. Anyway, what's up next? I'll show you guys what's up next. So, given the fact that it is the middle of summer, we're going to try a little Boostane data logging. So, what is Boostane? Boostane is basically it's a weapons grade octane booster. What it does is it raises the octane of presumably 93 octane to that of like a race fuel. In this case, a race unleaded, which would be like 100 octane, 104 octane. But the real idea is to see what its effect is on knock sensor voltage. Right now, I don't really have an issue with knock with my car. I'm not throwing any timing at the car, especially at the air charge values that we've got right now. And because of that, I really don't have to worry about monitoring knock sensor voltage. But I got to thinking a little bit. One of the issues that you can run into is fuel quality. And although I'm not leaning my car in terms of tune, what I do want to do is I want to put, let's see, whatever the, hold on, let me get my, put on my glasses of professoring here. What was it? I was going to try to get this thing up to like 100 octane. So we're going to put, I don't know, we're going to put about 3.5 ounces, 4 ounces of this stuff, whatever it works out to be, in the tank and see if it lowers the knock sensor voltage. Now, again, keep in mind, it's not a pulleyed car, but it is supercharged. And I'm not running it lean like from the factory, the way, you know, the Hellcats are extremely lean. I'm throwing a lot of fuel at the car. Well, even though you're throwing a lot of fuel at the car, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are immune to knock, even if you're not playing with timing values. And the reason for that was pretty simple. It boils down to fuel quality. So what we're going to do is we're going to, I guess, put this stuff to the test. Now, it's already been proven to work. I mean, you've got guys like Racer X, Demonology, and a lot of other guys that have used Boostane in their cars, and it will even trigger the high octane mode for the Demon. And that's all fine and good, but really what I'm looking for is, does it make any difference with knock sensor voltage? I highly doubt that it will, but it'll be something fun that we can test, because at this stage of the game, we're starting to run out of things that work, all right? We've already proven that the throttle body was not gonna work. We've also shown, or at least basically pulled the ripcord on that cold air kit, because quite honestly, it hasn't shown to work on other cars that I've tested so far. Mild combinations, mild pulley combinations have actually improved using the stock airbox in either a K&N or a stock filter. Doesn't make a lot of sense to go after, well, a $400 proposition when it's not going to be fruitful. Not to mention the fact there's other fun stuff that we can test along the way. Given the fact that we've proven that removing cats doesn't work, that throttle bodies don't work, but the only thing that really does work is gearing and tuning the thing, and really transmission tuning is more to that point. I think we've pretty well exhausted what can work on this particular platform. So let me check in with you guys real quick. Shane is in. Challenger 50, what up, B Mason? Hit that like, y'all hit that like button. DM saying thank you for the lessons, coming right up. Also, we're going to talk a little bit drag racing and how Friday went with some of this tire testing. Callis is saying, Mr. Mason, what's up? Oh, Rift clipped a 139. Very nice. Saying ethanol works wonders. Yes, it does. Just don't forget, man. Look, yeah, you're running the 85. It's working wonders for you right now. Just do not forget to run a tank of regular gasoline through that system. I recommend doing it about once a month. I know that there's ethanol stabilizers out there, and that's all fine and good, but I still recommend running your street tune, your street gas tune, at least once a month. Flush the ethanol out of the system. It will, it also helps to clean out the injectors, but the main thing is just to follow the protocol. It's actually Ford's protocol, and it works out pretty good for their flex fuel trucks. I used to have one, and it says clearly in the owner's manual, the Theon E85, that's great. Enjoy the extra power, but please, at least once a month, run a tank of regular gasoline through it. That will help keep everything clean. You know, burn at least half a tank through the thing. Long, steady state driving helps to get rid of it. And again, hey mom. Callus is saying, maybe a dumb question, but what are your thoughts on the 3.0 and 4.5 with the Hellcat? Ditch the 4.5. I wouldn't waste my time with that thing. The 3.0 is a more efficient system. That's the direction that I would go. Again, the 4.5, I'm not a big fan of it. You can have some tuning issues. The Whipple throttle bodies are a problem. There's a lot of things that are associated with the 4.5 that I just really can't fall in love with. I've seen guys make nutty power with them. Don't get me wrong, but they've proven themselves to be a little bit of a pain in the ass. Now, there are guys that can work with that combination and work with not only the tuning aspect, but making sure you don't run into limp modes, which is what you end up running into with those cars, the default modes and things like that when it senses faulting. Took a long time for guys to work around that and get around that. And now that they have, I don't know. It also depends on what you're going to do with the car. I mean, look, unless you are going, it's not just the blower itself, okay? It's the fuel system. It's the type of fuel you're using. It's the injector that you're going to use. What are you going to be doing with the car is really more to the point because, well, let me rephrase that. What's your end goal? If your goal is, I just want a solid mid 9-second car, man, you can do that all day long with the stock supercharger. If you're planning on putting a Whipple on it with nitrous and basically putting a full house build together, yeah, the Whipple's actually pretty good. Just know that you can potentially run into some teething problems with it. I'm talking about the 4.5. Now the 3.0, again, much more efficient, lower inertial drag, which is to say it has a lower parasitic loss. That's probably the direction I would go if I were to put a different supercharger on Little Miss Chandelier back here. Ripped is saying he used Boostain in his 426 with the Pro Charger. Should work pretty good. Oh, Speed Freak's asking, hey, be worthwhile gains doing heads and cam on a Hellcat staying on 93. That's a tough one, man. So here's the problem with that. Yes and no. You're going to run out of injector pretty quickly. So you're going to need to run at least 1,000 cc injector in the thing. There's a reason why I skipped over the 750s. Is basically because you're going to want to re-pulley the car. And what I mean by that is, yeah, you can get away with it-ish, running a cam. Okay, so here's one of the bigger problems you're going to have. When you put a cam in a positive displacement supercharged car, what ends up happening is you kill tip-in throttle response because you're killing boost response along the way. Now you'll say, yeah, but it's making more power with less boost. Isn't that safer? Yes, it is. However, the driving experience suffers. So what ends up happening is guys will put a cam on in the car, and the Hellcat cam is, and the Demon cam by association, really, if you're talking about both of them, are not very aggressive cams, but they're very good for a positive displacement supercharger. Very wide lobe separation angle. In fact, you'd be surprised. The 392 cam and the Hellcat / Demon cam are actually extremely similar, with only the exhaust lobe really showing any difference. The exhaust lobe's got about 8 to 10 more degrees of duration. So that being said, it hits real hard because it's got great boost response down low. Ideally, you keep a wide lobe separation angle, get a little bit more duration on the intake side and a little bit more duration on the exhaust side. Keep it wide, but tighten it just a little bit. That'll help you to dump boost. It'll make better mid-range power, and it'll do it on less boost. But again, the problem is it's going to feel a little bit lazy. Now, remember this. You've got a low compression 6.2 liter engine. It's only 9.5 to 1. Because it's only 9.5 to 1, it's going to feel soft unless you are really showering down on it. And even then, because you've lost some boost response, because you're not stacking boost, you still lose some response, and it's really not going to feel any different on the big end. It's just going to want to try to drag power out a little bit farther. And that's it. So how do you combat that? Well, you throw more pulley at it and you bring it back up to say 10 or 11 pounds of boost. At that point, you go from, say, 8.5 back to 11, and you can really pick up some power. So my suggestion, this is really going around my ass to get to my elbow, but the reality of the situation is if you put a cam in a pulleyed car, I'm sorry, you put a cam in a positive displacement car, you're going to have to pulley it. It's just the way that it works out. And unfortunately, it's just not fair when it comes to supercharging, because the centrifugal supercharger loves tight lobe separation angles. And the reason for, in fact, you want to throw like a circle track looking cam at a centrifugal supercharger car, because it's going to want to make power way down low. It's going to be real choppy. It's going to sound like hell. But believe me when I tell you, you got some boys heading out to Mexico this evening. As y'all well know, the studio is near Velocito, and it is probably going to be a pretty good night. There's been a lot of activity going on around here. But getting back to it, centrifugal superchargers love tight lobe separation angles because it helps the car make power when it's not making a ton of boost. And then it makes more mid-range power as it's building boost, and then the supercharger compressor itself drags power out the big end. That's how you put together a centrifugal supercharged cam. Unfortunately, though, like I say, I mean, look at the LSA cam, for example. It's got 122 or 123 degree lobe separation angle, something like that. Your Hellcat cam has 121 degree lobe separation angle. And again, it's like that for not only idle quality, drivability, and all of that, but it gives immediate, and I mean immediate boost response, because the intake runners are so active because of that wide lobe separation angle. So just know that if you do go that route, you do have to throw fuel at it, and pulley. Smoking a 5 saying, how to be? I've used VP Fuels unleaded octanium. It's their version of butane. I had a small knock in my 392 with the VP booster. It stopped the knock. Why would you have knock with the 392? I wonder. Is it tuned? Could be the case. Hey, Catalyst, thank you very much. He's asking, I sometimes see lightweight batteries on eBay. What are the minimum cranking amps for the Hellcat? For the lightweight batteries, you need something with enough cells to generate at least 1,100 cold cranking amps. I prefer somewhere around 1,200. I know that there are other alternatives that are about $1,000, but they can offer 1,400 and some are 1,500. The main thing that you want, though, is capacity. It's not just the cold cranking amps, it's also the capacity. I cannot remember the name to save my life. I know that Matt with Mo's Performance uses a lot of those itty-bitty, nasty little batteries for the trucks. Those things, you can play catch with them in the backyard. They weigh literally nothing, and they've got like 1,500 or something like that cold cranking amps, but the milliamp hours that it carries just isn't that high. So to start the thing, it'll fire it right up, no problem, but just understand that you can't run fans or a cool down feature or anything like that off of that battery. It just does not have the capacity. However, it will fire your vehicle up, and again, it weighs about as much as this can of butane right here. Oh yeah, by the way, guys, don't forget to shake up your additives. I've seen a lot of guys just go, I'm just pouring it in. Make sure you shake it up. This stuff, you've got stuff that's in suspension sometimes. Make sure that you don't have any of the mixture come out of suspension, and just anyway, always shake it up. Also, always shake up your oils. Anyway, but hopefully that helps. Oh, Big Dave says he's looking forward to the butane racing. I'm curious just to see what it does. We've done the deal where we've run the car on straight 100 octane, and the car seemed to like it. So can't really tell if it's gonna work, if it's not gonna work. I will say this: I did run butane once, and this is one thing that because guys, y'all know me, I am data logging my car all the time. And I ran into a fuel quality issue, and in fact, it was the same fuel that was in the tank. It was maybe only 2 weeks old. Anyway, I started getting a lot of false knock, or what looked like false knock, and or at least I should say it was pulling knock retard. I'm still trying to figure out why it was pulling knock retard. To be honest with you, I can't tell you why it was doing it. But I did add butane, and that problem went away. But I didn't notice any difference in the knock sensor voltage, but I wasn't really doing any back-to-back comparisons. Now that I've got enough data to talk about the back-to-back comparisons, then I can, you know, get you guys the results once I get those results. Oh, Dr. Div saying fuel injector connection 127s can't go wrong with fuel. That's very true. Oh, Smoking say I didn't change the tune in his 392, just run the Octanium. I just use it as insurance if I'm going to push it hard. It's not a bad idea to do, especially if you've got a known issue with fuel quality in your area. If you're running 91 octane, I would say it's probably a good idea to maybe mix in a little bit of butane. Dr. saying any reason butane or VP equivalent turns the plugs orange? It's just there's one of the products in here. I think it's one of the benzene products is basically it's an orange color when it's burned. So, or at least that's the residue that it leaves off. I forget, one of them was pink. It would turn the what the hell was that? Anyway, it would turn the porcelain's pink on the inside. Smoking's asking if I've tried the new HP Tuner's data log via the Android phone. No, I haven't, because I am a freaking caveman and I'm still using the MPVI-1. Dr. Div saying, what do you think a Hellcat makes boost-wise on a Hellcat with an Innovators West lower 275 upper on E with the Tomcat cam? It's going to make about 16 pounds of boost. Got a big build going on right now. I'm Pat's Dyno Wednesday, 309 gear. I would say 16 or 17 at least is what you're going to see out of that. Normally, Innovators West and a 275 is going to be good for around 18 pounds of boost. But with that cam, it's going to bleed off at least 2 pounds of boost, maybe even 2.5. So you might be around 15 or so, give or take. I would look for your KPA to be somewhere in like the 215-ish range, give or take. It would make probably just south of what a 275 upper on a red eye would make, which is usually like in these conditions 220-ish KPA, somewhere right in there. Power wise, I ain't even talk about power on that dyno. Forget it. That dyno, no, power on that dyno, it'll at least make 600 horsepower to the rear wheels. That's about all I can say. That dyno, we ain't even talking about that dyno. Oh, Rip is saying his buddy put down about 16 to 17, so that's about right. This is going to be a cammed car, so might be down just a little bit, but we'll see. PBR Doug's asking, Professor Bead, does the Scat Pack transmission only use 6 gears in versus 8 in sport mode? No, it uses 7. What's the difference? It does not go into 8th gear. Rip is saying close to 880 corrected numbers. Doctor is saying, sweet, customer wants 8 bills on a stingy dyno, makes 630 stock. That's why I said it'll make at least 600, dude. I don't even want to talk about that dyno. A dyno pissed me off. Jermaine, thank you very much. So he got his exhaust done on his 392. Is it normal for a 392 to pop when letting off the throttle? The car is an auto. Yes, it is. And that's cool that it does it. So yes, it's very normal for it to do it. Arthur Wall saying, salute to B. Mason. Got the ball guy with the arm flex. I like it. Dr. Div saying, yeah, it pissed me off too. Yeah, you had no idea. So, Friday night, if you haven't seen the Instagram post and you haven't seen HRP's post about me racing that GT500, that was a pretty fun race. I don't really want to get into the before the race stuff that was going on, but it just so happens that we ended up lining up somehow. And I don't really want to talk about the fact that those cars must have amazing brakes, because the dude dipped out on the second exit on that track, which, if you're not familiar with drag racing at Houston Raceway Park, at 130 miles an hour to hit the second exit would mean that you would have to do the equivalent of throw out an anchor. Like, you would be doing a how fast can I stop from 130 mile an hour test with your car. Anyway, he took the second exit and dipped out. Never saw him for the rest of the night, which is a bummer. Yeah, there's that. By the way, yes, the car is running about 1/10 of a second slower with the 18s. I think we're just getting these things scrubbed in right now. So we're doing kind of a little bit of an A-B comparison between Bravado wheels and a set of D517s. DBRs on both tires, or both wheels. It's in weight. Might surprise you. So the Bravadas with an 18-inch DBR is going to be 53.8 pounds. The 17-inch version is going to be right around 48 pounds, 46 to 48 pounds. I've got another full brand new set that I need to weigh, but the used set, which I've got one of them kind of lurking right there behind me, came in at 46 pounds. So you're looking at a pretty healthy 7-pound per side difference. Actually, it's almost 8 pounds per side difference. So I don't think that's enough to actually slow it down by 1/10. I think what it is just you got to scrub in a set of tires. And that's what we're doing. Not to mention the conditions were ass, man. I got to tell you, the car it was 60 footing slower. In fact, all of the loss of ET was in the 60 foot. But that'll happen when it's as humid as it's been. You know, it's just been nasty with the humidity. So, that being said, still ran 1060s, which, I mean, what's not to love about that, right? And had some fun in the process. But, yeah, if you get a chance, check out the Instagram page. Watch the race. There's a little bit of argy-bargy going on in the comments, too. The way that it was billed on the on the Instagram page is modded Hellcat versus GT500. It's like, hold up, wait a minute. First of all, Chandelier, yeah, she's modded, but dude, come on, not really that deep modded. I mean, it's got a gear and a trans tune and some fuel thrown at it and a rear seat delete on a tire. I mean, that's basically what we're looking at. Everything on the car except for the idler pulleys are right out of the Mopar catalog. It's like a parts bin car. And by the way, the idler pulleys are only done because the stock ones look like they were about to fly apart. I mean, if you've ever seen one, they're just, God, they're ugly as hell. So they had to go just for bling factor. But that being said, yeah, the GT500 was also on a set of ET streets. So that being said, I wouldn't say that he was stock, right? Because by internet rules, that's not stock, but yet it's very stock. Still trying to figure out how all that stuff works. Is it stock or is it not stock? I guess it's stock if you're in their camp, and it's not stock if you're in the other camp. Anyway, long story short, a couple of cars with stock boost, both of them running 93 octane, went down the drag strip. One of them ran a 10.8, wasn't me. One ran a 10.6, was me. Mile an hour was basically the same. Oh yeah, forgot one key point. Left lane is measuring exit speed only, it looks like. It's not measuring a trap speed, whereas the right side was. I'm not going to get into details because, you know, the wind light. But that'll give you an idea as far as what Chandelier runs, basically a 309 geared Hellcat versus a GT500. As C6 Jimmy put it best, the Wonder Mustang. I will say that if that car could 60 foot, it would be a handful to deal with at that power level. But again, because it's not a normal automatic, it just wasn't going to get out of the hole very well. And that's exactly the problem that it ran into. So anyway, let's see. So Dr. Diff, yeah, add 50 to it. Talking about the horsepower number. Rip saying his Hellcat popped a lot after he got the muffler delete. Yep. Dr. Sam Diff is saying at 130 on that track, I had to dip out on the very last turn on E. Yeah. Well, 127. So one of the things, like I say, man, I mean, if you can hit that second turnout, you're putting together a freaking show that nobody would have seen, which would have been a shame because I was actually going to, fist bump, tell the dude, nice pass. The car looked like it was running good. But yeah, Mustang guys get a little bit bent out of shape when the GT40 gets beat by something that's not, I don't know, made by NASA. Callus is asking, does setting your engine back a few inches really help with weight transfer? And have you seen any challengers that have done it? So you're gonna, well, I don't think you can really because there's not that much room to move it back. But let's say that you did. One of the things that you would probably see is you'd have to realign the rear end. One of the things that we're doing with the tires, one of the reasons why it's back here, is we're actually finding out where the tire wear is, what the footprint of that tire really is with the independent rear suspension. There's not enough available footprint. You have to completely realign the car, and you almost have to have the car either with stiffer springs or stiffer shock settings where the tires are basically, you're actually going to have positive, almost like a 1/4 degree positive camber with it if you're on the drag strip. So when you launch, you have a little bit more footprint that articulating independent rear suspension will settle into. If you're straight up and down or even negative camber, then as that suspension articulates, you just have less and less of a footprint. It's really easy to see with the Vipers. Those things, you got a tire that's this freaking wide, but you've only got like this much footprint if you're going on the inside tire going around corners. It's nuts. And when they launch, you'll see them kind of sit like that, and that wide ass tire has only got about that much of a contact patch hitting the ground. So yeah, that can be a little bit frustrating to say the least. But anyway, would it matter? Well, the thing is that these cars are heavy. I don't think it would make that much of a difference. These cars, nobody is needing to do that given the wheel and tire compounds that are out today. So I think that it would be a significant exercise in futility and an expensive experiment at that. So wouldn't even bother with it. Wouldn't be worth your time. That kind of thing is really more for like a tube chassis setup. If you're legitimately building something with a solid rear axle and it is a drag race or it is a race type car, then yeah, it would make sense with that. But for a street car, it's like, no, there's nothing that's going to be beneficial about doing that. Nitro, thank you very much for beating that Mustang. Good job. Got the arm flexing. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, like I say, man, I'd have loved to shake the guy's hand. I mean, like I say, it's a really pretty car. I haven't had a chance to run one yet. That was first time for me for a stock car. And look, listen, the car's running 1080s in the heat on a tire, which I would suggest having. The only thing that spooks me about that car is, well, to be honest with you, is the transmission longevity. I just don't know enough about those cars. And guys, believe me, look, I'm on record as saying that if that thing had a traditional automatic, like an HP90 in it, you'd almost be a fool not to pick one up. It would have been the next, how do I put this? It would have been the prop evolution of the GT500 as it would compete directly with the car that it really helped to create, which is the Hellcat. Let's be honest here. God, talk about an opportunity lost. Blows my mind. But Nitro, thank you very, very much, man. I just saw Dr. Discussion. GT40 or Shelby 500? GT40. No question about it. Let's see. Jose saying that he recently installed a 185 thermostat on his 392, and within a week I got a check engine light saying the thermostat got stuck open. Does it need to be tuned? Yes, it does. P0126 will be the code that it threw, And yeah, you're going to have that code turned off in your tune. What's happening is it's just basically thinking that you're exactly right, that the thermostat is stuck open. So I think my car, Chandelier, is the current record holder for to go the longest without having a P0126 code thrown. So if that is the right one, I believe it is. So anyway, Shalandra went 2 weeks. Chandelier went 6 or 8 months before she actually threw the code. Don't know why. Different operating system, older operating system. So, Boosted's asking, does the Knurl bead work well on the D5? Here's my thoughts on the knurled bead. So think about it like this. If you have a flat surface and there's no cavities anywhere in there, obviously. If you lube the rim and you put the tire on the rim, when the bead seats, there may be some of the rim turning inside the tire, but it will eventually rub that the soap or whatever. It'll eventually rub that kind of out of the way, so to speak, and it will seat to the rim. The thing about the knurled bead is that in the knurlings, in the cavities, if you will, that can hold some of that soap, right? Some of the lube, if you will, and it can't go anywhere. So because of that, depending on the width of the bead and all this other stuff, it's like it never goes away. I will say this though, I've never had a problem with it with the D5s. So, but I will say that I do have to run those tires in before I and I may need to get them rebalanced at least once before they're kind of settled in, scuffed in, so to speak. But the Bravadas that I'm running, doing the 18-inch tire testing right now, the Bravadas, I've got maybe 2 or 3 inches of rim rotation inside the tire, and that's it. So, I mean, to be honest with you, I think it's better without it. But it didn't hurt in anything. Just know that here's how you solve the problem, okay? Get the tires mounted. Tell the guy, please don't use a lot of lube on these things. It's a race application. I don't want the tire spinning in the rim spinning in the tire. Get the tires, put them on the car, take them out, and get a couple of like 40 mile an hour hits. Wide open. Just let it downshift and shock the tires. Do that a few times. Do a couple of wide open hits at like 50, for a couple of seconds. Just let it, hit, shock, and then load the wheel and tire combination up. And then obviously you will have marked them before you did this, right? So you mark them, and when you go back, anyway, when you go back and see how much they've moved, then that's usually when that will stop moving. You got to hit them 2 or 3 times, a couple of good hard street hits, and that's usually it. But again, I have noticed the D5s do move a little bit more. Let's see. I got my chair sliding out from underneath me. Just about did a face plant right there for you guys. That would have been pretty sweet. Let's see. All right, so oh, Rich saying he had to tune his after putting the 180 in. Don't know if that's the same. It is the same. And again, thank you, Nitro. Appreciate it. Racer X checking in, saying what's going on, buddy? Glad to see another live show from the Professor. Got the fist bump. I like it. Everybody say what's up to Racer X in the house. Dishing out that 411, baby. That's right. Give the real what's up to that GT500. Oh, damn, did I say that? Yeah, I kind of did a little bit. See, the reason why I'm being a little bit cheeky and a little bit smug about that. Oh, by the way, I am rocking the, gotta honor the kill there. I had so many people hating, saying, "Oh, if you ever ran a GT500, you'd smoke your ass." I'm like, really? So anyway, that's why I was pretty glad. And by the way, this guy's an experienced racer. We're not talking about somebody that just showed up at the track. This guy knows what he's doing, and that car is at the track relatively often. But I will say this. Kudos to the guy for bringing it to the drag strip and putting it on a tire. Mad respect for the guy in the fact that he is the only person that has been bringing out a GT500 with any, I don't know, with any consistency, is the best way I can put it, to the drag strip. So, you know, mad respect for the guy for that. But, and more than likely, I just motivated him to start spending a lot of money on that car. We'll see. Doc saying if I've thought about chalking the tires. I haven't chalked them, but I have pattern tested the radials. That's what I will typically do. I'll do an actual pattern test as opposed to chalking them. And that's mainly for the 20s. I pattern tested the 17s at 18, 19, 20. No, I'm sorry. 18, 19, 22, 24, and 26 PSI. Jermaine, thank you very much. Asking, what does it take to get a 392 into the high 10s? Weight reduction and really good DA. So let me put you in like hop in beside me. We're going to go for a trip in the Wayback Machine. So back in like, what was it? 2017, when I did the first Mopar Mageddon, Shalandra ran an 1139 and C6 Jimmy's SRT ran a 1025. So, and that's with passenger seat, rear seat taken out and on a drag pack and tuned. So 1025 puts you there. You could make the argument that if that car had a cam, it for sure would have gone, obviously it would have gone 10s. Pretty sure that that's really all that, well, let's put it like this. Let me reset. Ported intake, a good ported intake, 85 millimeter throttle body, long tubes, metal substrate catalytic converters, and then the aforementioned weight loss program, drag pack included, would put you in about a 1092-ish run. I don't think you'd have to put a cam in it, but if you did put a cam in it, it would probably shave another couple of tenths off of it and get you down into like the high 1070s. But again, there's one kind of twist to that. You would have to have solid low density altitude, like real low DA. I wouldn't necessarily call it a 10-second car. However, I would say this, in that configuration, in warmer weather, I wouldn't be surprised if that car ran 1120s fairly consistently. So again, weight reduction, every bolt-on you can imagine except for a cam would get you eerily close to it. But I think it would take a cam to make it consistently run a deep enough number to where you would have a pivot number, like in other words, you know, slower or faster as conditions change, of like an 11.2. I think that's really, or 11.0 rather. And I think that would be the better number for you. In other words, at 0 DA, you're going to run an 11.0. And the reason why I say that is because Quick Bricks, freaking leviathan of a challenge or a Charger, 4,600 pound race weight, naturally aspirated car. It's a 392, but with a cam, stock converter, and a lot of tune revisions. I must have I got it. When I finally figured out how to get the car to keep in mind, that thing was cutting 157 60 foots with a stock converter with a small cam. That car went an 1127 and I drove it to an 1132, and if that car had lost 200 or 300 pounds that it had on, say, a 1320 or a Scat Pack core, even if you did the normal 10th per 100 pounds, that car would have been a 10-second car. So just goes to show you. I mean, it's weight reduction away from actually running the number, because that thing was just a real heavy car, but it made a lot of power, and it made a lot of power everywhere. Let's see. Let me get back up here. Riv saying his Hellcat was a different story, talking about that thermostat. Racer X saying he needs to get that little stockish Mustang to H-Town and run that red rocket in mine. Come on down, baby. Yeah, I'd love for you to come down. Got a little shindig going on in January. Talk to me. So, if y'all don't know, Racer X's car makes like all the powers. And I've been on Racer X going, man, get that thing. We need to, let's see what it runs. But it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, because there's other modifications coming to make it durable. There's some durable mods that are going to have to take place before that car can really be showered down on in anger at any significant power level, because 10R80s have a nasty habit of being really okay right up until the point where they check out. So, but it's a nice problem to have. I'm real excited to see how well that car does on a tire running anger. But let's see. But that car is really well built, guys. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, check out Racer X's channel. He's got a real good breakdown of everything that's done to that car, and it is being built right, that's for sure. Callis is saying, is the Turbo 400 Trans a next step up over the HP 90? No! Look, if you go Turbo 400, the car is, it is literally no longer a street car. That is a 3-speed automatic, with really the only benefit to that being that it is in the tune. You can actually tell the car, nope, it's a manual. You can force it to just be a Turbo 400 manual valve body if you wanted to. Run all the converter that you want to. And no, I mean, yeah, if all you do is drag race, maybe. But the world record holder is not running a Turbo 400. So if the world record holder isn't running a Turbo 400, he's running an HP 90, by the way, and that is a 7-second car. In fact, in the heat, it's a low 8-second car without really pushing it over the edge. So, yeah, if you can run an HP 90 in that configuration, I would say that a Turbo 400 is not at all necessary. I don't like the idea of running Turbo 400s in a car that it's a lot of expense and a lot of headaches where you really don't have to go that route. I think that some guys got frustrated with HP 90s and they didn't really have some, not only tuning, but driving techniques and the like, I should say, figured out. And so that was a way that they were trying to combat that, was just to put a tried and true known drag race combination in it in terms of transmission. And I just don't think it's worth it. Plus, again, you lose overdrive. And when you lose overdrive, it's just, to me, it's just really not worth it. I mean, unless you're building a grudge car or something like that, it's just really not my cup of tea. Rift is wanting to run Racer X. Pretty much think everybody's going to want to run Racer X. I tell you what, don't mess with it from a roll. Bad idea. I mean, that's that car, when it's sorted out on a tire from a roll, yeah. That's how you break a draggy. Let's see. Oh, Dr. Diff is saying when he mounted his Mickey Thompsons, he put them on and wiped the lube off, sprayed some 3M. That's right. A lot of guys will do that. They'll hit them with 3M adhesive. I've heard all kinds of stuff with tires. I know that one of them I've heard, like E6000 is another one. A lot of things they can do to, you know, it's to get the tire to stick to the rim. But realistically, once that bead pops and locks in place, it's pretty hard to get it to move. And you can hit it really hard once the lube and everything else kind of gets squished out of the way and moved out of the way. But again, it may require you to have to rebalance those things, which is obviously a pain in the ass. Dr. Div saying, what's going to happen when they close the track? Man, I don't know. I'm probably going to have to get real used to running 8th mile, honestly. Evadale is an hour and a half away, and that's a little bit of a stretch. I'm cool with about an hour, but an hour and a half is a bit of a problem. And then you've got the prospect of Pine Valley, but Pine Valley is 2 hours or 2.5 or something like that hours away. And if an hour and a half is bad, 2 hours is worse. So that's probably not going to happen. So you're going to have to start looking at 8th mile, which is kind of ironic because I'm like, 8th mile. 8th mile is where Mopars actually do the best. So it's like, but it is what it is. The one downside to 8th mile is that you don't get to leg the cars out, and that allows cars like Mopars to pretty much, you basically clean house with for cars that, like for street car class, not for like all out race car, obviously not, but for what you would see normally at the drag strip, it's going to be a Mopar fest every time you go to the 8th mile because they are so strong through like through the 8th mile and into, you know, basically the 1,000-foot mark. That's all Mopar. And then everything from basically the 8th mile to the 1,000-foot mark back to the 1320 is going to be pretty much everything else. But if you don't have a car that's set up for the 8th mile, it can be a long night. I can tell you that for sure. And, you know, I like 8th mile. I'm not really mad about 8th mile. I just don't really get the data that I would like to get on 8th mile because I'm not really loading the car for very long. But there is Mexico, and I can always do a couple of quick watts to get what I need in terms of data in that respect. So no big deal for me. This car will hit the number that I need to get to for data pretty quickly. So I'm pretty much in and out of it as it sits. So no big deal. Looks like we'll be running 8th mile from now on. Sam, so true. Saying I've gone down the auction rabbit hole. This habit will be the death of my income. Dude, it's the death of all of our incomes. Dr. Div saying he's got some good cams for that 392 for sure. Yep, need to be focusing on that Warlock for the 392. In fact, there's going to be a revision to the Warlock, I think. I am thinking about tightening up the Warlock and advancing it, but we'll see. I need to take a look at the specs on that thing again, and opening up the exhaust duration just a tad, but I need to take a look at that thing, make a little bit more of a traditional cam out of it, just with some, you know, aggressive ramp rates. Nothing too crazy though. Got Boosted and Sam hanging out with Doc. Mike saying, so I have the infamous ticking noise in my 19 Challenger RT, but in his blower motor. Is there an easy way to access it for inspection, or should I just bellyache to the dealer for warranty? Bellyache to the dealer for warranty. I would not get, here's the thing, I would not get into removing the dash. And the reason why I say that is because, number one, you're going to lose fasteners. Everybody does. Number two, and probably more to the point, once you start removing that stuff, it's going to take a pro to get it to go back together and fit properly. You will get frustrated. You'll get in a rush at some point. You're going to be on the phone. Phone's going to ring. Somebody's going to annoy you. You're going to be like, God, I just want to get this thing put back together. You're going to try to hammer in fasteners. They're going to strip. It's going to be a pain in the ass. If you're under warranty, dude, I kick that thing straight to the dealership and say, fix this. Don't make it not do annoying things anymore. And they'll say, yes, sir. And they'll take care of it for you. Sam's asking, Turbo 400 versus a 488 RE to swap in a 6-speed car, Turbo 400. If you're going to be swapping in transmissions and it's obvious that you're looking to do a pretty solid drag setup, you cannot go wrong with a Turbo 400 if that's the direction you choose to go. And what I mean by direction is you are turning it into a drag race car at that point. That means 4,500 to 5,500 RPM stall converter. We're talking trans brake. We're talking basically all of the sauce to make a drag car or to make a grudge car, to make something nasty on the street. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take a freaky transmission to get there, and that Turbo 400 will handle anything that you throw at it. So that's the direction that I would go. And if you really want desperately to have an overdrive, just throw a gear vendors on the back of it. Think of it like this. You're already going to have to get a different drive shaft as it sits. Throw a gear vendors on the back of it. You can put an electronic lockout on it. Don't try to split gears or anything like that. You're not freaking 18-wheelering over here. Put a 370 gear in the thing and just toggle it with your toggle switch. Go first, second, third. You're on the highway. Kick it over. And then you're good to go. And then you've got kind of a taller gear when the gear vendors is kicked on for your downshift. So you can leave that thing on, like if you need to downshift and get around somebody on the highway. So that's where the gear vendors really works. When you're talking about splitting gears, you get the benefit of having a highway gear on the highway. And when you're in town or racing, you get the benefit of having a more aggressive gear. But don't try to first gear and then gear vendors and then it shifts and then you don't even try to do that. Just gear vendors on the highway, turn the gear vendors off going down the road. You can't break the thing. And get the thing out there, and that's what I would build. If I were building something, that's basically what I would put together. If I were going to try to, really throw the wood at something, that's kind of the direction I would go. But a gear vendors is pretty expensive, so just know that coming into it. Let's see. Sam's thinking that the 47 would be a better fit. It just depends on what you're doing with the car. Cal's asking, did I change the name of the Hellcat from Miss Revlon to Chandelier? Yes. So Chandelier had to get the name changed, primarily because Revlon, she had to reinvent herself. I'll put it to you that way. Plus, all of my cars have stripper names. So you've got Sierra, which is Sierra anyway, but it sounds like a stripper name. Foxy, which is obvious what that one is. And then Chandelier is just a play. It's a play on words of the spelling of Challenger, just like Shalandra is a play on the words of Challenger. So anyway, I let that nickname ride for a little bit, but she's always been Chandelier in my eyes. So, and that's how she's going to stay. So that's why if you see the little deal on Draggy or whatever, it says Dodge Chandelier underneath it. So that's why. Mike saying, also, speaking of ticking noises, I hear Hemis don't like to idle. That's untrue. But how long is too long? I know waiting in line for Popeyes won't hurt anything. Waiting in line for Popeyes is a honorable thing. Not just doesn't hurt anything. It's what you should be doing. The chicken sandwich is unbelievable. It is to die for. By the way, hold on. They don't have dirty rice anymore. I don't know what the deal is. I don't know who made that call. I don't know who made the decision. I don't know why that came down, but they don't have the dirty rice anymore, which I think is horseshit. But get over that. Just order my chicken tenders, not the nuggets. Nuggets are gross. Get the chicken tenders with the Mardi Gras mustard, family-sized mashed potato, double gravy, beans and rice. Be all right. But yes, no, nothing. If your car dies in a Popeyes drive-through, you get out of your car, you kiss it right on the top of the hood, and you walk through the drive-through to get your order. You honor that car's death. You honor its sacrifice right then and there. And if anybody behind you, they're just gonna have to understand. But they will understand because they're in Popeyes too. So, but anyway, getting back to your point. No, here's the thing. It's not that it doesn't like idling. What ends up happening is if you idle a lot with these thin oils that are being called for some of these cars, the trick really is to change it by hours, not by how many miles that you have on the car. And really, it's fleet vehicles, cop cars, cars that sit there and just idle forever. They don't ever get their oil changed at the right intervals. So if you're driving the car and you're idling, just know that you need to change oil probably every 3 months, as opposed to every 6 months, where that's where you hit your 7,500 mile mark, but you've got the equivalent of 14,000 miles on the thing with it just idling. Because you figure, you know, for every minute of idling, you know, at 650 RPM, that might be equivalent to, I don't know, 30 miles worth of driving. So you can kind of work the math backwards. Say it's 20 miles worth of driving. I'm sorry, not 20 miles, 2 miles. Good God, that'd be amazing, right? Figure it's like the same as, think of it like a mile every couple of minutes, right? Whatever you want to say. Good Lord, man, my brain just fritzed out there. The hell was I thinking? Anyway, you get the idea, though. You know, for every minute that it's idling, you can think of it like an extra mile at 60 miles an hour, but the RPM's too low. That's why I said 30 miles. So, for every 2 minutes, it's like a mile or whatever. That's the way you have to think of it. And if the car, truck, or whatever is idling for a long period of time, like a full day, and it's idling day after day after day like that, then that's when I think it's starting to break down the oil. And you've got heavy lifters for the MDS system. That's another thing that it's not. And that, by the way, that's not a Dodge issue either. That same issue happens to the DoD LS platforms. Very common. It's just something that you don't hear about unless you're wandering around in that world. But the old LS powered cop cars would run into the same problem. A lot of those things have had cams and lifters and engines and whatnot put in them. So it's not limited to just Mopar. Riff saying, darn, now I want Popeyes. Slime's asking, what changes do I anticipate for switching to the 8th mile? Nothing really, because technically I'm still running 8th mile now. I'm just running it out to another 8th mile and then shutting the car down. The car runs consistent mid sixes in good weather. Mid to high sixes in the weather that we have now. There's really not going to be anything to change for the car. It's going to do the same thing it always does. I'm just not going to be legging it out as far. So, maybe a little bit easier on the car. The other fun thing about 8th mile is it's more fun for the people watching because you can see the entire race take place. The downside to 8th mile racing is typically just the venue itself. A lot of times those venues just aren't that big. And, all of us are used to a very large venue with Houston Raceway Park. I don't know that they'll be able to handle a lot of the run out that's going to be there. But I will say this. I don't know if a lot of those guys are going to be showing up to 8th miles. A lot of those cars really are quarter mile setups, and they're the ones that really going to have to take the time and reset their vehicles for 8th mile. And it's a big difference, especially when you're making significant power that you're used to being able to put down through the quarter mile. And now you're trying to put that down through the 8th. It's not like you can't run your quarter mile car in the 8th. You can. Whereas a lot of times you can't run an 8th mile car down the quarter. You simply run out of gear. just can't go any faster. So, you know, it's, you know, for a lot of the bigger turbo guys, turbo LS guys that aren't set up for 8th mile, they're going to have to figure out how to set those vehicles up for 8th mile. A lot of that has to do with gearing. Some of it could do with torque converters and things like that. But the difference with the 8th mile cars is that when a car is set up for 8th mile, they're typically more violent to watch. As you may imagine, they're trying to get as much power down and achieve a red line by the time the 660 mark passes. And given the fact that it's going to be kind of a learning curve for a lot of guys, I think you're going to see most guys just showing up and running what they got now. And then if they decide they want to keep doing it, then they'll, you know, make adjustments to their trucks and cars. My thing is this, though. I'm really more in the camp of, I think you're just going to see street racing start to kick back up. I don't know that a lot of these guys are going to want to fool around with any of the 8th mile stuff. I think it's going to be more of a, like a retrograde back to like a lot of the roll racing, 40 hits and things like that. So is that a good thing? Probably not, but I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening. You never know. Somebody could decide to open up a track somewhere out here, but it's going to be a lot of work and a lot of money for very little return. You know, so what do you do? Anyway, nothing wrong with 8th mile. I've had a good time out at Houston Motorsports Park, HMP. They have a great burger over there too. So, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing what's going on. One thing I will say about 8th mile racing is that you will see more old school hot rods in an 8th mile, at an 8th mile track. One thing I've noticed is that a lot of the old school muscle just doesn't show up to the 1/4 mile anymore. It just, for example, this past Friday, there was one super pretty Chevelle that will show up. And it's a fair thing to say that it's one of the slower cars on the track. It's a 69 Chevelle, but good Lord, I mean, it is period correct pretty. And it's running street tires. It's a mild big block is what I'm guessing is in the thing. And it's, you know, a low 15-second car. And before you go, 15s, ha, 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 ha. Now, believe me, when you're dealing with big block torque, a highway gear, and you're trying to get this thing to move out of the hole on street tires, it's not going to be super fast, but it's super cool. And believe me, if that thing can smoke the tires all the way down the 1/4 mile, I'm sure if he just lobbed into it. A lot of that is going to be more driver than anything else. But I digress. That's one of the few actual old school cars that you'll see. The cool thing about 8th mile is that you can have, you know, 8 or 9 second passes in the 8th mile that feel, I mean, you're hauling ass. I mean, you're in it for a decent amount of time when you have a slow car. And what I've always said about 8th mile is that 8th mile favors like a bell curve, right? 8th mile favors the really slow cars, and it favors really, really fast cars. And the reason why I say that is it favors really slow cars because you're wide open for, let's say, 9-10 seconds. So it's like you're making a 10-second pass and you're getting all the sound and the noise and everything else. It's just, it's shorter distance, right? So you get all the benefits with really none of the risk with the slower cars. With the faster cars, a little bit different reasoning behind it. With the really, really fast stuff, something that can accelerate to, say, 120 in the 8th. That's a pretty damn fast car. And that's going to put you in like a low 9-second 1/4 mile pass. The reason why that's kind of cool is because you're not running 150, 160 miles an hour out the back half of the track. And it's a little bit easier on parts and driveline parts if you have the car set up to go that fast. It just happens to be that they're a little bit more violent coming out of the launch. But it's cars in the middle, street cars, especially modern street cars that can run 10s from the factory. It's not very fair to cars like the GT500, for example, where it just doesn't 60 foot well. 8th mile is if quarter mile racing rewards launching with, you know, half a tenth at the 60 foot equates to a full tenth at the back half of the track, which is typically how it's looked at. I'm guessing 8th mile would be pretty similar to that. It's just, it overly rewards the launch. And that's one of the reasons why Hellcats do so well. And it's one of the reasons why I don't mind running 8th mile, because it's like a built-in advantage that I'm giving up when I go this quarter mile. But we'll see. There's a lot of really fast cars, really cool cars that are out there. Oh, hey, Chuck, thank you very much, buddy. He's asking, hey, B, so Nitto Tri-5, Sticky Mickeys, or what for my 6-speed RT plus shaker for street performance with a 390 gear? My bro, hard to beat the freaking Mickeys, bro. They're Mickey, and they look really good. Now, here's where things get a little bit different. Tri-5Rs, well, the new Tri-5R2, I should say. The Tri-5R2, good tire in the wet, and that's about as far as I can praise that tire. However, it is really good in the wet. But it's a little busy to look at. I know that a lot of guys that doesn't really bother, but it is what it is. The other thing about the Tri-5R2 is they do typically run a little bit wide. Not a problem if you're running stock tires and you run the stock size. It actually looks pretty good. But if you run a 10.5-inch wide wheel, like say you're running Demon replicas like I am, what happens is the 305, which you're expecting to be straight up and down, you know, on the wheel, as far as the sidewall profile is concerned, the bulge out a little bit. Now that doesn't sound like that big of an issue, but the problem is that the Nitto Tri-5 R2 305 35 20 that you would run on the back of that car if you had a 10.5-inch wheel or a 10-inch wheel, the problem is that the wheel or the tire itself is really like a small 315. So you can almost think of that tire as like a size plus 0.5, like it's a half size larger in terms of width. And that can be an issue on Challengers because then you really can and you will potentially run into a run into a rubbing problem. If I can get that out. So again, just something to consider along the way. Don't be surprised if you need to do some massaging and some moving around of your inner fender well. I did a how-to on that, and it's pretty simple, pretty cut and dry. Super easy to do. Can be a little bit fidgety to do, but again, if you're running the wider wheel, that's something that you may run into with those tires. But good question. Thank you for the contribution, man. I appreciate it. Oklahoma's asking, I have a 2020 Scat Pack. Now, when I turn, I hear a rubbing noise in the steering column. What do you think that is? The only rubbing noise I can think of in the steering column that you would run into would be the clock spring. But I don't know. If you're not familiar with what a clock spring is, it's a thing that goes behind the steering wheel, and it's got the connectors, the electrical connectors for the steering wheel, and the actual connector itself that the steering wheel connectors come into contact with. It's on a moving it's like a moving connector. It's called a clock spring. The reason why it's called that is so it moves with the steering wheel, and it allows, and they're spring loaded basically, and it allows the thing to turn and still have contact. That's the only thing I can think of in terms of turning, because you have electric power steering. Could be the electric power steering motor making a noise. I'm not really sure. That's a strange one. But those are the only two things I can think of that would create any kind of noise at all. Sam saying he thought about buying an X Enterprise Charger RT. I would probably not buy that car. Probably been run really hard and put up wet. Yeah, he said probably been to hell and back. That's what I was saying. Mike saying, I'm on a roll with the amateur hour question, but here goes. No, man, ask the questions. If you're asking questions, chances are other people have the same question. Am I missing out by sticking to regular Pennzoil Platinum over Ultra Platinum, or just stick to what works? Stick to what works. I mean, Ultra Platinum's good, but I mean, 040 is 040, 020 is 020. I run Mobile 1 in all of my cars. Never have had issues. Again, stick to what's available. Really, more to the point, change your oil. It's more important that you're asking about oil change questions because you are, in fact, changing your oil very regularly. Again, don't forget, 6,000 miles is the maximum. In other words, when you get to 5,000 miles, you spend the next 1,000 miles collecting an oil filter, making sure you got the oil with you, all of that kind of good stuff. Don't let it go over 6,000 miles ever, never, ever. I prefer on daily driven vehicles, don't ever go over 6,000 unless you absolutely have to. Always check your oil also. Nathan's saying, how are you? I'm doing well, Nathan. Hope you're having a good day. Ripped is saying, I don't like 8th mile racing because only one track within 100 miles actually preps, and unfortunately they're closing. That sucks. Oh, so Rip, the only track he has is Sonoma, and they do not prep their track at all. That's great. Tux is saying, hey, B. Mason, been a while since seen you. How's life? Going well, man. Hope yours is going well, too. Tux is saying, your new profile pic looks good. Yeah, I had to get chandelier to the main stage. So I'm pretty interested to see how the boost testing goes. I'm really not sure if there's going to be a change in knock sensor voltage. We'll see. I don't have a whole lot of faith there. I also may do, and this is where some things went a little bit weird last time, but I may do some filter, no filter runs to see if there's any gain or loss there. I know I did the testing back in, February, where I put the stock filter up against no filter, and the data, even the data sets were showing that it was running better without the with the filter in place. I may go back and do a no filter test just again to give it a go, have a little bit of fun with it. I know a lot of guys are saying, remove your filter, it's going to pick up, and we're going, yeah, but we got cars running 9s with the stock airbox, so don't see it helping, but we'll do some of that. And again, I'm trying to do this testing. I'm trying to do all of this testing in 2,500 foot conditions ish. You know what I mean? Because testing it at 0 DA doesn't prove anything to the guys that live in higher altitudes. And I can never get to a 5,000 foot altitude where I live. Well, I could, but it would mean like I'm living underneath an erupting volcano, right? So the idea is to try to get you guys data at a density altitude that's right there in the middle. And down here, one of the problems that we have is 2,500 foot DA in these conditions means the air is thick. I mean, it is so humid that the air charge that I'm reading is, and I need to go back and look at some data logs. The air charge that I'm reading, because of all the humidity, is registering somewhere around the same air charge that I would get at like 1,200 foot DA with nice crisp air, which is to say that I'm running less timing with this thick air because I'm reading a higher air charge. You have a cascading timing table with these cars. The more air charge you get, the lower the timing, because presumably you're getting more air and you don't need the timing. Well, in this case, I've got air mixed in with a bunch of humidity, which isn't helping anything. And you say, well, what would happen if you threw a couple of degrees of timing at it, to try to make up the difference, right? Funny you should say that, because I've got back-to-back runs of the car with the car throwing timing at it, and with it, like for example, there's about a 2-degree timing sweep between 2 runs. You're gonna love this. No difference in mile an hour and no difference in ET. And I'm looking at the thing going, why is it not going faster? And it was just kind of a funny thing. So my car is not very timing sensitive. And that's one of the things that I noticed with my car in particular is I've tried throwing timing at it. I've tried doing everything to this car, and it just like brushes it off. It just doesn't matter. It could not be any less interested in going faster. So that's one of the funnier things when I was doing the data logging for the for the throttle body, because I did a stock throttle body pass, did the aftermarket throttle body pass, and I got all this extra air charge, and it's dumping timing and doing everything else, and I'm going, damn, man, this is nuts. And then I threw the stock throttle body back on, and it was pulling even more air charge and had an even higher injector duty cycle with the stock throttle body. And it's like, what do you do? You know, so anyway, that's what I've been running into is that. So anyway, again, talking about getting off topic. The point of it is I want to try to get you guys all this data in a relatable density altitude condition. And this is the only way that I can really do it. Alberto, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Contribution says, hey, B, I test drove a Hellcat today. I have a Scat Pack right now. What are your opinions on it, seeing that you've already done that? Man, so when you test drove the Hellcat, there's going to be a few things that you probably noticed if you've got a Scat Pack now. One of which is that it feels... So I'm going to give you driving impressions, and I'll kind of wrap up my thoughts on it afterwards. But I want to just kind of work with the initial driving impression that I always had of the Hellcat is that it felt heavy. That was one of the weird things about the Hellcat that I never really could have translated from Scat Pack to Hellcat. The Hellcat always felt a little bit heavier, and it is heavier, don't get me wrong, but you felt it with the Hellcat. The other thing that made the car feel heavy was the fact that just putting around town, especially if you're in street mode, one of the things that I still notice to this day about my car is off-boost throttle inputs are very, very lumbering. It's not slow, it's just slower to react than the Scat Pack. Scat Pack, bam, throttle response right now. What do you want to do? Let's do something. Let's do something fun. Let's do something stupid. Come on, let's do it right now. What's the matter with you? Come on. That's the Scat Pack. It is, of all the cars, Camaro, Mustang, all of it. The Scat Pack is looking, it's like a freaking hammer trying to find a nail. Everything's a nail with the Scat Pack. It's like, you want to smoke tires? I'm smoking them right now. Let's do this. Let's get high. I want to do something stupid right now. I mean, that's the smartest thing we can do is something dumb, right? That's the Scat Pack. That's one of the endearing qualities about the Scat Pack is that it is constantly, it's like, it's trying to hump everything. It's like a puppy. You ever turn a puppy loose in a room full of pillows? Yeah, you ain't sleeping in that room that night. That's the Scat Pack. That's why I love that car so much. The Hellcat is a little bit different story. The Hellcat is, again, under partial throttle conditions, it just doesn't have that pop. It's, again, it's a little bit lumbering. And the reason for that, number one, less aggressive rear gear. It's got a 262 as opposed to a 309. Number two, it's a smaller engine. And when you're not in boost, it's got number three as its other problem, a significantly lower compression ratio. 9.5 to 1 versus 11. So 9.5 to 1 versus 11, 6.2 versus 6.4. Gear ratios being less aggressive, the Hellcat just felt kind of numb. Now, you put that thing in boost and load it up, and all of a sudden it starts to come alive. And it's like you've thrown a switch on an electric motor that just kind of shows up out of nowhere, and it's like, wow, that's pretty cool. But just playing around with the thing, that's one of the things that I noticed about the Hellcat. The other thing that I noticed about the Hellcat is that it's deceivingly fast compared to the Scat Pack, especially in stock form. because the acceleration rate, the G-force, is somewhat similar between the two cars, tire for tire. Obviously, you're gonna feel the Hellcat hit harder at some point than the Scat Pack, especially when you get into that 3/4 throttle where you're just kind of hanging the thing on the converter and it's making 10 pounds of boost. But there's like a transition area in there where the Scat Pack, again, just feels peppier, spunkier, like it just wants to play. And so between my driving impressions of the Scat Pack versus the Hellcat in that respect, plus when you start showering down on either one of them, it's going to just convert gasoline into noise and tire smoke. I don't know which one is better in that respect. On a ET Street R or on a DBR on the street in no prep conditions, you can use every bit of that tire with a Scat Pack. And I'm here to tell you, you put a DBR on a drag pack on a Scat Pack and turn that thing loose on the street and it will straight up dead hook on the street. Makes life kind of fun. So Hellcat, it goes into boost, it tries to annihilate tires. So I don't think that if you've got a Scat Pack and you're having a lot of fun with it now, that doesn't always translate over into Hellcat world. It just doesn't. And the other thing is, the problem with the Hellcat is that you're only a credit card away from really bad decisions with a Hellcat. Whereas with a Scat Pack, it's already really good from the factory. And aside from maybe a trans tune or something like that, there's really no reason to kind of, you know, jump into that car and start making changes, especially the 2019 and up cars. That operating system is really good. So if you've got a 19 or a 20, that's really the way to go. So anyway, just my own personal driving impressions. I was always, I don't want to say disappointed, because that's really not the right word. It's just a completely different driving experience. But I think you can agree with me when I say that a stock Hellcat does not feel like it has 700 horsepower. To me, that was the only issue with that car, is that it just never felt like it had 700 horsepower. And on top of that, the other weird thing, what I was talking about earlier, is it's deceivingly fast. You can be cruising down the road and it's just kind of lumbering along down the road. You look down and you're doing 90. It's super smooth. And you already know that with the Scat Pack, but the car is just really smooth, makes a lot of big torque, even under partial throttle conditions, especially when you put it under load. Get the thing into boost. It, like I say, the sounds are all very similar. It just, with the gearing, you're just going faster. The G-forces, the load that you feel in the seat, isn't altogether different under most throttle input scenarios. I will say this, though, the trans tune in the Hellcat is significantly better than the trans tune in the Scat Pack, in my opinion, at least in the versus the Scat Packs, the earlier Scat Packs. But thank you, Alberto. I appreciate that. Let's see. Oh, Sam's saying 5 versus a 15 cold rating oil. What would you suggest? I believe Chrysler suggests 0. You can always go with 0. There's nothing wrong with what's known as a weight. So the way oil works is like this. You have multi-viscosity nowadays. You can still get just straight weight oil, straight viscosity oil, like a 30 weight or a 40 weight. Most of the time that's used in small engines. It's really not what we're talking about here. I don't even know why they would use it in those engines either. It's not needed. But anyway, the 0 weight in this case means that it's going to flow like a 0 weight oil at 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. It just means that it flows well at that temperature. The thing is that when you go like 0-40, 0-40 is actually pretty amazing when you think about it, because it flows like a 0 weight at 0 degrees Celsius. and it has the viscosity of a 40 weight oil at 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees, which is to say that it has a viscosity of about, say, 12, okay, at 212 degrees. So it doesn't really change that much, but it does. It's very stable, but it has a rising viscosity, okay? Now, I want you to think about 0W30 as a comparison. 0W30 is interesting because 30 weight oil at, actually I'm going to tell you about 10W30. 30 weight oil at 100 degrees Celsius has a viscosity of roughly 10. And the 10 weight oil, the 10 viscosity oil at 0 degrees Celsius, that's the idea, is that it flows as well as a 10 weight oil would flow at that temperature. It's still thicker, but the idea is that you have a 10 weight oil at that temperature on the big end at 212 degrees. If you noticed, it's okay to have a lower number of oil down there because its viscosity will inevitably nearly always be higher. It'll always be thicker when it's cold than it is when it's hot. The idea is just to get it moving. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to put a bigger number cold viscosity oil in your car than what it's rated for. And the reason for that is, let's say you put a 15W50 weight oil in the car. That could potentially cause problems with very cold starts because it's just going to take forever to get the stuff flowing. It's going to have real high oil pressure once it kicks off, but it's going to be hard for that stuff to flow and get to different areas because pressure in this case is, well, in any case, is just a measure of restriction. So what's happening with this really thick oil is that it's actually so thick that it's going to cause problems. You're getting more into the realm of the types of viscosities that you would see with a single weight oil, like a straight 30 weight oil at those lower temperatures. Back in the day, just to give you an idea, in really cold temperatures, when they didn't have this more sophisticated lubricants that you have now, starting the car was a problem because you had this thick ass oil because it's cold. Trying to start the car, it was just all this resistance to just get the thing moving. That's why this other type of oil was brought into existence, was to allow cars to start when they're cold. So I guess the point that I'm getting to here is you can run a 0. I wouldn't run a 5 or a 15 if the car isn't asking for it. You can almost always, depending on what the final viscosity, the hot viscosity is going to be, you can always go down, but you can't, in your number for the cold rating, the cold viscosity, you just can't go up. So you can go 0W40 if the car is calling for a 10W40. That's not a problem. And really, you could probably go 040 if the car is calling for a 10W30. That's not even a problem either. The problem is if you go from a 040 to a 1550. That's going to be an issue. You're going to have to let the car warm up, provided you don't have other flow issues, which I doubt that you would, because realistically, you have to be in pretty cold conditions for that to really make a difference. But let me jump to another point here about oil. If you notice the way that the car is engineered, that 10 viscosity is something that you see pop up a whole lot. So remember we were talking about 1030, where that 30 weight oil is a 10 viscosity at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The reason why they use 212 degrees Fahrenheit is because if you ever notice, that's roughly the temperature that your oil temperature will be above most of the time. It'll usually be above 212, and that's to get rid of any water, condensation, things like that in your oil. It just helps it to vaporize and just not condense back in. Well, what's funny is the 392s and a lot of the cars that run 040, they run at a higher oil temperature. In some cases, it could be 225, 235 degrees. And if you run the temperatures back, it's roughly a 10 oil or a 10 viscosity oil at those higher temperatures. So that's one of the things that you have to look at is you want that oil viscosity to be as stable as possible. That's why race cars may use really thick oil and they have to sit there and warm up and warm up and warm up and warm up. The reason why is they have to get the oil to a temperature that it will actually flow properly, and that temperature is going to be elevated because they got to get the oil hotter to where it flows more or less at that 10 viscosity number. So if you've ever wondered why, why does one run this and why does one have that, and no, that's the reason why. Typically they're trying to get to that 10 viscosity number or somewhere really close to it. By the way, fun fact, Mobil 1 viscosity, the 040 for you Hellcat and 392 guys, Mobil 1's around 11 to 11 and a half, if I remember correctly, and Pennzoil Platinum is 13. Just means that it's slightly thicker at the higher temperature. Let's see. Chuck saying his tech said he could get more miles out of Pennzoil 5W20 full synthetic, but it seems like my tone is meaner when I change it between 3,000 and 4,000 miles. So one of the things, my thing is this, change your oil often. If you're beating on the car, if you're going to drive it aggressively, maintain it aggressively. Don't try to go mileage. Don't try to stretch it out. If a tech's saying, oh, you can get more mileage out of it, maybe not. Here's the thing. I stick to what I know works. And in this case, 6,000 miles is the absolute cap. I won't go any more than about 5,000 miles. Buffy gets her oil changed at 6,000 miles religiously. So just something to think about there. I don't like going any farther than, again, 6,000 miles between oil changes. And keep in mind, I don't spend a lot of time idling. It's mainly a lot of highway driving. So I'm not as hard on oil as others might be, keeping in mind that idling is one of the hardest things you can do in terms of oil. It just doesn't do that well in idle conditions. So just something to think about. But yeah, I mean, if you're changing your oil every 4,000 miles, keep doing that. Nathan's asking him, I from America, I'm from Texas. Sam's saying, I tend to run 1540, but I live in Florida, so not many cold days. Yeah, if you don't live in an area where you're not going to see cold, like legit cold, like, I don't know, 40 degrees, then I don't know that it would really make a difference, to be honest with you, at that point. Because your 15 W40 is going to flow like a 040 would flow at 32 degrees. That's about what that 15 is going to flow at about 45 degrees. See what I'm saying? So you're going to have a lot of intersection points where at one temperature, the 040 flows a number, and then at an elevated temperature, the 15 will flow the exact same, have the exact same viscosity. So, Tux is asking, do you know why some cars will rev a little bit when you're in reverse, not touching the gas, but letting go and pressing the brake at the same time? Stepdad's 2008 Honda does that. It's going to be a torque management feature in the trans-tune portion of it when you go to put it in reverse. And the other part of it, buddy, I have no idea. Sovereign saying, hey, B. Mason. What's up, Sovereign? Jebediah's in saying, what up, B. Mason? Got the fist bump. I like it. HP 75 Trans has an upgraded transfer case compared to the HP 70. Has that made a significant difference in its durability and power that it can handle? I think the HP 75 is the one that's in the Trackhawk. And no, I think that's just the case. The internals are going to be basically the same. Let's see. What? And whenever I tell you, you look like Beyonce, man, if you're going to, yeah, maybe Beyonce without her wig. 60 Power saying, oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I didn't even see this pop up. See, are you tempted to pulley Revlon knowing the car will respond to more boost? By the way, I went 10-0 at 138 with a 285 upper, 15 PSI, full weight charger, 1200 DA. So here's the thing, man. Look, I've been around the Hellcat game for a long, long time. And I mean, I've worked at a shop, worked at Pikes Performance, where I was around these cars all day, every day. I've driven all of them. It doesn't matter if it's a stock Hellcat. It could have been a 392 car, 6.1 car, 5.7 car, truck. Heavy, like alpha package builds, Bravo package, like Racer X's car was, which is probably one of my favorite packages. Anyway, I've driven all of them, and here's the thing. I've driven all of them, and there are concessions, there are compromises that I'm not willing to make. Number one, I don't want to switch my car to E85. And in my opinion, you're going to have to go to E85 to really get the most out of the stock supercharger. I have enough experience with fuel quality issues that lead me to believe that pulleying my car may not be the best idea. To give you an idea, your combination, 285 upper, hang on, 285 upper, roughly 15 PSI. We've seen as much as 16 PSI out of that same combination down here in deeper DAs. On 93 octane and butane is a 970 car in a Challenger with the passenger seat out. And a 980 car, basically 979 with the passenger seat out, 982 with the passenger seat in, basically. That car is fast, and it's a great number to cover. But what I'm trying to do with Chandelier is I'm trying to do as much with as little as possible with that car to show just what the combination is capable of. And what that combination would be capable of, for example, if direct connection was still a thing. And I'm doing it all with off-the-shelf parts. In other words, I'm doing this with 309 gear out of a Cat pack. I'm doing this with Mopar rear seat delete kit. I'm doing this with basically part shelf build, part shelf type of build with a drag pack wheel and tire setup. So for me, going with a pulley setup, I know what I could get with the fuel quality that I've seen. 285 is a bit of a stretch. I would probably say that a 295 running about 14 degrees of timing is about as aggressive as I would really want to go. On pump gas, I would probably even say that I would take the 295 and drag it down a little bit. I'd probably flag it at about 13.5 degrees of timing and just let all of the, well, I'd probably flag it at 14, and then I would let all the nannies just drag timing out of it. In other words, hot spark table and all of that. I would do some adjustment to that, but not a lot. And that would, I think, live pretty well on 93 octane. But there's always that one tank of gas. There's always that one thing that I'm reminded of that freaked me out, that made me never want to put a pulley on my car. So with that, I like going after stock pulley records, and I like the fact that I've been able to go at 10-12 at 130, I think it went 136 miles an hour in really crazy DA. You know, I've been able to run the numbers. I've been able to get down there. The car has run a slew of 10 teens. So there's that to consider, right? So I can't really complain with how the car is running. And I don't feel the need to have to really get out there and throw more power at it, especially, again, when you consider that I've driven all of them. I've run every one of these Mopars in every one of the configurations you can think of, whether it's nitrous 392, supercharged 392, supercharged 426. Take your pick on that one, whether it's centrifugal or Hellcat. Whipple builds and pissed off stock blower builds, which is probably one of my favorite builds, by the way. All of them. And I didn't come away from the experience going, man, I really want that. Probably because, admittedly, when I'm load testing those cars, I may as well be wearing a white lab coat. You guys have heard me say that a lot in the past. When I'm doing street load testing and I'm in fifth gear and I roll into the throttle and I'm basically, it looks like I'm piloting the space shuttle. I got the computer running. I've got, you know, I'm just completely focusing on knock retard and all this other stuff. I'm trying to make sure everything's cool on the street with street gas or street E85. And, you know, it's funny. I've had them start hazing the tires and you just kind of, you know, back off the throttle. And I'm like, all that did was wreck my data set. So for me, it's more annoying than anything else. Like, oh, okay, great. Okay, I got to redo this entire data set. Let me get to a spot where I know I can roll into the throttle and see if I can just get this. I don't want to do it in sixth because then I'm doing 150 miles an hour down the highway. That's not necessarily safe, but a lot of times you're getting data on the car and this is what we're going to be doing with it. So anyway, it's more convenient when the cars are making more power because they would make it through the power sweep, the high load power sweeps quicker. So, you know, everything looks good, car feels good, everything's good, you know. So, but for me, I always like the stock boost stuff. It's more fun. Plus, I take my car on a lot of road trips, and I like the idea that I can just put 93 octane gasoline in the thing and just driving Miss Daisy with that thing. I don't have to worry about fuel quality, and I don't have to worry about, well, where am I going to get E85? And, you know, well, if I put my 93 tune in it, I may as well swap out pulleys, and it just turns into more of a, then I'm really motivated to jump in the middle of. So, and again, a lot of that just has to do with my experience with these cars and having driven them over and over and over and over and over again. You kind of learn to like one thing and get annoyed by other things, and it's funny. You'd think it'd be the other way around. Like, I've been around all these cars, like, man, I got to build myself an 8-second car. Driven them, I mean, they're fun in the short term, but you know, it's like, you guys have heard me say this a ton of times, man. It's like dating the stripper, dude. I mean, you know, crazy one at that. I mean, everything is going to be nuts and crazy and wow, what the, you know, right in the beginning, but you know, dealing with that stuff long term, hell no. So anyway, that's the reason why I never really wanted to do anything else with it. I've already kind of been there and done it with other cars too. That's something I wanted to say. I've had crazy fast stuff in the past, and all it really did was drain my bank account crazy fast, number one, and number two, it ended up being more of a headache than it was worth. At the end of the day, it just was like, good God, somebody just come buy this thing from me and get out there and y'all have fun with it, because I'm over it quickly. Anthony's saying production on the current Challenger Charger now till 2026. That is what I am understanding. So the labor agreement for Brampton, if I'm not mistaken, was agreed to through 2026. So you'll have concurrent building of the new STLA large, STLA medium, and STLA small platforms. What looks like, I think that's going to be here in the States. And then you've got Brampton, Ontario, that's going to be building the Challenger and Charger as we know it today through 2026. So we'll see how that ends up. Sam's saying that his truck has got a surge, but it's got over 300,000 miles on it. He's asking if it's a converter issue. I don't have a clue. Typically, converters will shutter under a partial throttle, but even that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a problem. Some higher stall converters will shutter just because that's the nature of it. But typically, A surge in RPM is not going to be a converter issue. Oh, 60 saying the risk isn't worth the reward. Totally understand. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that so because I've had that experience and because I've had it with several different vehicles, not just one or two, I've gone over the top with pretty much everything I've ever put together. I was a bit moronic in some cases, or at least more moronic in others than I was in some. But the idea is that I never, let me rephrase this. I didn't keep any of them. And there are a couple that I ruined along the way. One of the Vipers, I swear, is a 99 ACR, and I should have never even touched that car. That's one of the ones that I feel like I ruined along the way. So I would argue that if you're going to put a lot of money and build something really fast, make sure that you're okay with some of the headaches that you're going to catch with it along the way. The whole saying, more money, more problems. Well, more power, more problems. And it's really when you start to test the limits of parts that you don't want to break, like half shaft, drive shafts, to name a couple of easy fix options, which are not necessarily easy on the wallet, but you can deal with the cost of some of those things. But you start really throwing the wood to these cars, and the big one is fuel quality for me. That's the one that really kills it, because you can't control it. Again, I mean, unless you're rocking Boostain or Torco or, whatever kind of magic mix you're going to throw in there, race gas, you just can't control what that gasoline is going to do. And so then you start looking at E85. Well, this stuff doesn't work with E85. At least I don't think it does. No, it doesn't. Anyway, it's not going to work with E85. And now you're worried about quality with E85. How is the car tuned? You've got to have working knowledge, and you got to be working with somebody that speaks fluent Mopar, number one, but even more importantly, number two, has worked with your combination on multiple occasions over several years. And the reason why I say over several years is because as fuel quality changes, as winter blend, summer blend, and all of that comes into effect, you need to make sure that you've got a tune that can work with everything. So it's not going to be a set to kill tune, because it's got to be able to be a compromise with all these different fuel qualities, whether it is E85 or gasoline. Yeah, you can always put together a race gas tune. That fuel is always very consistent. But now we're talking about multiple tunes, and the cost of race gas is astronomical anyway. So which direction do you really want to go? And that's, for me, that's all of these things are going through my head when somebody says, what pull are you thinking about? All of that whole thing that I just got through saying, that whole rambling on that I just got through doing, that is a block of thought. It just comes into existence. Like all that just goes woof like a fog in my head whenever I hear pulleys. It's, I start just looking at all these things that I've, all the experiences that I've had. So, Doc Div saying, on a 392 Mex effort, is my high roller cam works? Something's gone here. Is my high roller cam works the Nezamza? I think we're trying to ask a question, Doc, and I don't know what you're trying to ask. But the high roller cam is probably about as aggressive as I would go for one of those cars on the street with a street converter. If you're planning on going more aggressive than that, you can. You probably would start wanting to look at a different intake manifold altogether. You're probably going to look at a different converter at that point as well. So I'm not really sure what the question was, but I think that if you're trying to go more aggressive, you're going to have to go more aggressive in other areas as well, for fear of starting to lose drivability. Now you can always tighten up the LSA, which, is not necessarily a bad thing. But again, you start getting into issues with idle quality and drivability under partial throttle conditions. Smoothness of the car kind of goes away at that point, and you could end up getting a surge that you'd end up having to have the thing idle at like you know, 850 RPM, and it's trying to push through lights because of that converter. So it can get real frustrating. So, but anyway, I don't know what the question was, but hopefully we'll get it answered. Chuck saying, all right, I'm out. Have a great night, Bead. Chuck, thank you very much for hanging out with us. And guys, we are coming up on 2 hours. Oh, hang on a second. 62 Power saying Josh is his tuner. He only uses Diablo. I'm assuming that's HHP. It's my disappointment, but it's a non-clutch pulley, and I swapped to the pulley to a 275 on MS-109 at the track. The 285 is strictly 93. By the way, Josh, there he is, Josh from HHP. There he is. Okay, cool. Josh knows his stuff. He's really good. So 275 on MS-109 is good. And obviously you should have a pinned crank if you're running non-clutch pulleys. And 285 strictly 93, probably a good idea to only run MS-109 with that 275. Oh, Joe saying, is it wrong that I want Dodge to bring back the all-wheel drive Charger RT? Not at all. Cool car, by the way. 62 saying, thanks for your help, sir. Absolutely. Don Power saying, what? I just tuned in. I know, right? Well, we've been going on for about 2 hours, my man. So you got to catch the next one. But with that, guys, we are coming up on 2 hours. I am going to have to wrap it up. So with that, guys, if you can send it, don't bend it. Keep your shiny side up. Stay safe out there. Love each and every one of you guys. Would not do this without you. And we will catch you guys on the next one. That is a wrap. Miss you, Ray. Love you, buddy. Adios.